To test my worth, my old man made me work as a server on our family's private submarine. When we hit 200 meters, I sensed something wrong with the engine and the cabin pressure. I rushed into the main hall to warn everyone. Instead, I ran into my gold-digging ex-boyfriend. He was holding his new girlfriend, pinching his nose as if I smelled. Nora, you're just a waitress who clears plates. What do you know about engines? You're just making up stories to ruin my proposal, aren't you? Are you still obsessed with me? The guards dragged me away while my ex snapped my access card in half. Everyone laughed at me like I was a joke. Obsessed with you? Go to hell. The submarine began a terrifying descent. 400 meters. 600 meters. 800 meters. Crack. The pressure shattered the glass, and the ocean came rushing in. I looked at the trashy man with cold eyes. Go be obsessed with the sharks instead. Nora, the VIP section is running low on champagne. Get moving. My greasy supervisor squeezed my wrist, his eyes wandering over my body. I yanked my hand back and grabbed the tray without a word. Inside, I was laughing. Tomorrow, my evaluation period would be over. The first thing I would do is toss this pig into the open sea to feed the fish. I am Nora Sterling, the sole heiress to the Sterling Global Group. For a whole year, I had been an intern server on the Abyssal Voyager, a luxury submarine owned by my family. This was my father's ridiculous ultimate test. He said if a woman wants to inherit the empire, she has to suffer 10 times more than a man. I walked toward the VIP area with the champagne. I told myself to endure it. This was the last day. Then, I saw the last person I wanted to see. Nora? Is that really you? Why are you serving drinks? The voice was full of fake surprise. It was Chet Vance, my first love and a total social climber. He was busy pulling out a chair for a rich girl named Whitney White. Whitney looked at my cheap uniform and curled her lip. Chet, how could you ever date someone like this? She's pathetic and smells like raw fish. Chet's face flushed, then he put on a smug expression. Whitney, honey, don't be mean. We all make mistakes when we're young and dumb. Nora, I didn't think you'd sink this low. If you had stayed with me, you wouldn't be a servant today. I didn't want to waste my breath on these two. I turned to leave, but then I felt it. A high-frequency vibration rattled the floor. My ears stung from a tiny shift in air pressure. My heart dropped. I knew exactly what was happening. Someone was messing with the ballast tanks. We were diving past our safety limits without anyone noticing. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. I sprinted into the main observation hall. Listen to me. Someone is sabotaging the sub. I screamed. We are diving too deep. We're going to be crushed. Follow me to the cockpit right now, or we all die. The hall went silent. Then everyone looked at me like I was a lunatic. Smash! A glass hit the floor near my feet. Whitney pointed at me and shrieked. You crazy bitch. Who's dying? Security. Throw her to the sharks. Chet stepped forward, trying to look like a hero for his new girlfriend. He grabbed my arm and barked at me. Nora, stop this. Are you doing this because I dumped you? I'm so disappointed in you. He shoved me hard. I hit a metal cart and felt my wrist swell instantly. No, it's real. The engines and the pressure are wrong. I scrambled up, staring at the crowd. Please believe me. We're running out of time. Believe you? Believe a crazy waitress. Whitney walked over in her high heels, her eyes full of disgust. I think you're just jealous that I'm in the VIP section while you're serving. You're just mad that Chet loves me now, so you're trying to ruin our night. I gasped from the pain in my wrist. I don't have time for your drama. If we don't get to the cockpit, we're all dead. Cash. Chet wanted to impress his girlfriend, so he intentionally knocked over a bottle of Romani Conti. The dark red wine soaked me from head to toe. The cold, sticky liquid ruined my cheap uniform. The smell of expensive wine mixed with my sweat, making everything feel like a cruel joke. He pretended to be surprised, then pointed his finger at me. Look at this, Nora. You tried to steal the wine and destroyed it. Are you trying to start a riot so you can escape? The other passengers started nodding and whispering. Oh, so she's a thief. No wonder she's acting insane. Poor people always have sticky fingers. She looks honest, but she's a criminal. Throw her off the boat. She's ruining the atmosphere. I was shaking with rage. I pointed at Chet. Chet, you liar. You did that on purpose. I'm a liar? Chet looked offended, acting like the victim. He turned to the security chief, Garrick, who had just arrived. Chief, you have to help us. I bought this wine for Whitney's proposal. This woman ruined everything. She's a thief and she's cursing the whole ship. Garrick looked at me, dripping in wine, and then at the polished, wealthy couple. He didn't hesitate for a second. He frowned with disgust and barked. Grab her. 2 large guards grabbed my arms like I was a toy. Let go of me. I'm telling the truth. I fought back. Suddenly, a calm female voice spoke up. Stop. It was Dr. Serena, a well-known oceanographer. She walked over and adjusted her glasses. Chief, something is weird. I actually felt the pressure change too. As a scientist, I think we should check the cockpit. Safety comes first. My eyes lit up. Finally, someone with a brain. Chet immediately stepped in front of Dr. Serena with a fake smile. Dr. Serena, you're too kind. You don't understand how people like her work. People from the bottom will do anything for money. She's just trying to scam us. Don't let her trick you. She just wants a payout. Whitney joined in with her annoying, high-pitched voice. Yeah, Serena, look at how trashy she is. Stay away or you'll smell like that wine. But Dr. Serena hesitated. She looked at the crowd and backed away. My heart sank into my stomach. Garrick waved his hand impatiently. Enough. Take her to the brig at the back of the sub. We'll hand her over to the cops once we surface. The guards dragged me toward the dark hallway. As I passed Chet and Whitney, I heard them laughing. Stupid bitch. You think you can win against me? She deserves it. I hope she never shows her face again. The guards dragged me deep into the bowels of the submarine. The wealthy passengers watched me leave with hateful glares. Not one of them helped. The brig was at the very back. It was small, dark, and smelled like rust and oil. Just as the guards were about to throw me in, a kind voice came from behind. Hold on, Garrick. It was Engineer Miller, the chief engineer. He was holding a cup of tea and walking slowly with a smile. Garrick immediately changed his tone to something submissive. Oh, Mr. Miller. Sorry to bother you with this small stuff. Miller sighed and looked at me. She's just a young girl who's stressed out. The brig is too much. It'll look bad for the Abyssal Voyager's reputation if this gets out. He looked at Garrick with a soft suggestion. Leave her to me. I'll take her to my private lounge and talk some sense into her. Garrick couldn't say no. Miller was the top technical authority here. Of course, Mr. Miller. Whatever you say. The guards let go of me. I watched Miller closely. I didn't trust him. Why was he helping me? Chet and Whitney followed us. Whitney was still whining. Mr. Miller, she ruined my floor and our wine. You're just letting her go. Miller smiled and pulled out a checkbook. He signed a check and handed it to her. Miss White, I'm sorry for the trouble. This is for your wine. Tonight's tab is on me. Whitney's eyes turned into dollar signs. She grinned instantly. Thank you, Mr. Miller. You're so generous. Chet nodded along. You're a real gentleman, sir. The drama seemed to vanish just like that. Miller smiled at me. Come along, dear. I had no choice but to follow. But he didn't take me to a lounge. He led me through a maze of corridors. We stopped at a heavy door marked with a high-voltage warning sign. Mr. Miller, this isn't a lounge. It's the main machinery room. He shoved me inside. He slammed the heavy, soundproof door and locked it from the outside. Through the small round window, his kind face turned into a mask of pure evil. You've got a sharp nose for trouble, little girl. He hissed. Why are you doing this? I pounded on the door. Why? He laughed like a maniac. Because the lead designer stole my life's work. I'm going to make him watch as his precious submarine sinks to the bottom of the trench. I've programmed the autopilot to dive slowly. By the time anyone notices, it'll be too late. He walked away, his crazy laughter echoing in the hall. I was trapped in a room of deafening noise and vibrating metal. Despair started to set in as I looked for a way out. Then behind a massive, dusty turbine, I saw a hidden panel. It was a secret maintenance hatch. My dad had included these in the design for quick repairs. I used every bit of my strength to pull the heavy hatch open. The maintenance tunnel was dark, cramped, and filled with the smell of old iron. I didn't care. I knew this ship better than anyone. I crawled through the narrow space, heading for the cockpit. When I finally popped my head out of a hidden panel behind the pilot's seat, I froze. Miller wasn't there. He had set the death course and abandoned the bridge. The cockpit was empty. Red lights were screaming on the dashboard. The screen showed we were heading straight for a deep-sea trench at a dangerous angle. I jumped out and lunged for the controls. As soon as I touched the stick, a loud alarm blared. The screens went black. Warning. Illegal access detected. System locked. Damn it. Miller had set a trap. The main controls were useless now. The only way to fix this was to find the master override card. The chief guide usually carried it. I had to get back to the main hall. When I burst back into the observation room, people looked at me like I was a ghost. How did you get out? Chet and Whitney looked shocked. I ignored them and grabbed the chief guide by the collar. Where is the backup card? Give it to me now. The sub is out of control. The guide turned pale and reached into his pocket. But Chet lunged forward and snatched the card first. You crazy bitch, still trying to pull this scam? He glared at me. You just want this MasterCard so you can rob the VIP rooms. The other passengers didn't know what was happening. They saw the rich guy and the messy waitress and chose to believe him. The sub feels fine to me. Why is she screaming? She's probably a terrorist. Security, get her. Suddenly, Dr. Serena stood up and pointed at the depth gauge. No, look. The depth meter. We're diving too fast. Her voice was trembling. A few people near her looked at the screen. It's actually moving. We're at 600 meters. It's dropping. But most people were too far away to see. They thought it was a trick. Whitney pulled on Chet's arm. Chet, don't let them lie to you. They're probably working together to steal your card. The sub is perfectly stable. Chet felt powerful. He loved having everyone's attention. His arrogance took over completely. He held the card up high. You all want this card. You all think we're going to sink. Fine. Let's see what happens now. He smiled at me, gripped the card with both hands and snapped it. Crack. The sound echoed through the silent room. The only key to saving the ship was now in pieces on the floor. Dr. Serena let out a scream of pure horror. Chet looked at me with a smug grin, like he had just won a game. I didn't give up. I turned to the crowd and screamed. We need to break down the cockpit door. Now, if we don't take control before the hull collapses, we're all dead. Nobody moved. A fat guy with a gold chain pointed a finger at me. You said we were sinking 10 minutes ago, and we're still here. You're a liar and a crazy person. Everyone, let's grab her and teach her a lesson. Their cold words and mockery crushed my spirit. Suddenly, hands were on me. Fists started hitting me from every direction. Then, a piercing siren screamed through the whole submarine. The lights turned blood red. A mechanical voice filled the air. Warning. Hull integrity at limit. Survival probability. 0.01%. Every face in the room turned white as a sheet. The sub shook violently, throwing people against the walls. People started wailing and covering their ears. It's over. We're all going to die. In the chaos, the first mate went crazy. He tore a piece of wallpaper off the side wall. Behind it was a red button under a glass cover. What is that? Serena shouted. The dolphin one. The mate screamed. It's the only emergency escape pod. It can survive any pressure. It's the only way out. He grabbed a fire axe and smashed the glass. Before he could push the button, the fat guy with the gold chain kicked him in the back. Get out of the way. I'm a billionaire. I'm not dying for a deckhand. The fat guy lunged for the button, but other passengers tackled him. The hall turned into a bloodbath. People started killing each other for a chance at that pod. Husbands pushed wives. Sons kicked fathers. Human nature was at its worst. Suddenly, Chet broke away from the fight. He sneaked around the back and hit the red button. The floor opened with a roar, and a capsule-shaped pod rose up. Chet, take me with you. Whitney screamed, running toward him. Chet shoved her to the floor and climbed into the pod. Get lost. It only fits one person. I'm not dying for you. Whitney stared at him in horror. Chet, you monster. Chet didn't care. He slammed the hatch shut. Before the pod launched, he looked through the window and flipped me off. I could see his lips moving. Goodbye, loser. I watched him steal the last hope for survival. I was shaking with rage. Whitney was on the floor, cursing his name. But then I saw the control panel on the pod. The lock light was still red. The pod was designed to be released from the cockpit. If you forced a launch, it would just hang there like an iron coffin. 3 seconds later, Chet's voice came over the intercom, filled with terror. What's happening? Why isn't it moving? The glass is cracking. Water. There's water. The screaming stopped instantly. The pressure of the deep sea had crushed him, and his pod into a pulp. He got exactly what he deserved. The sound of Chet's death was not a roar. It was a sickening, muffled crunch, followed by the dull hiss of deep-sea pressure swallowing a tin can. Through the reinforced glass deck floor, we watched the Dolphin-1 capsule collapse inward like a crushed paper cup. A single cloud of dark crimson bloomed into the black water, caught in the sub's exterior lights, before the ruined pod detached and tumbled into the abyss below. Inside the main observation hall, the silence lasted for 3 agonizing seconds. Then pure, unadulterated madness broke out. Whitney fell to her knees, her hands clawing at her own hair, letting out a shriek so sharp it sounded like glass shattering. Chet. Chet. The fat billionaire who had tried to steal the pod backed away from the hatch, his face turning a mottled, sickly gray. The axe slipped from his trembling hands, clattering against the deck. The crowd of elite passengers, people who had spent their entire lives buying their way out of consequences, were suddenly faced with a reality that money could not bribe. We're dead. A woman in a diamond necklace whimpered, rocking back and forth in a puddle of spilled wine. We're all dead. A loud pop echoed through the hall. A rivet on the port side support beam sheared off under the crushing weight of the ocean, flying across the room like a bullet and embedding itself deep into a wooden display cabinet. A fine, needle-sharp mist of seawater began to spray through the microscopic gap, hissing like a venomous snake. People began screaming, running in circles, shoving one another into furniture. Shut up. My voice didn't just carry. It cracked through the hall like a gunshot. I stepped onto the central bar counter, wiping the dried Romani Conti from my eyes with the back of my sleeve. The cheap waitress uniform was soaked, cold, and ruined, but when I looked down at the panicking crowd, My gaze carried the weight of an empire. Dr. Serena looked up at me, her eyes wide. Garrick, the security chief, was shaking against a pillar, his hand still resting on his holster. Nora. Dr. Serena stammered. The controls are destroyed. The MasterCard is broken. How? How do you know what to do? Because I know every single weld, seal, and circuit in this vessel, I said, coldly, my voice cutting through the alarms. The Abyssal Voyager wasn't built by Engineer Miller. It was designed by Sterling Maritime. And I am Nora. Sterling. The room went dead silent again, save for the screaming sirens and the hissing spray of water. Whitney stopped her wailing, looking up at me through bloodshot eyes. What? What did you just say? She's lying, the fat billionaire yelled, pointing a trembling, fat finger at me. She's a server. She clears my dirty plates. I didn't even look at him. I reached beneath the collar of my torn uniform and pulled out a heavy, dark titanium pendant that had been tucked against my skin. It wasn't jewelry. It was a physical, military-grade biometric override key, engraved with the crest of Sterling Global Group. Garrick's jaw dropped. As the chief of security, he had been briefed on the company's highest clearance protocols, though he had never seen the master key in person. His face drained of whatever color it had left. Miss Sterling. Garrick choked out, falling back a step. The chairman's daughter. Garrick, I commanded, stepping down from the bar. If you want your family to see you again, you listen to me and only me. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. Garrick practically screamed, snapping straight to attention. Despite his terror. What are your orders? Dr. Serena. I turned to the oceanographer. What's our current depth? She rushed to the secondary environmental monitor, her fingers flying over the glass. 840 meters. Test depth limit is 900. If we hit 950, the main observation window will implode. We have less than 4 minutes, I said. Miller didn't just lock the bridge. He set the automated ballast valves to flood. He's at the lower maintenance manifold right now, making sure no one overrides his death course. I looked at Garrick. Draw your sidearm. You and I are going down to the keel. Wait. Whitney scrambled across the floor, grabbing at the hem of my pants with her manicured nails. Her designer dress was torn, her makeup running down her face in dark streaks. Nora, please. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were. I didn't mean those things I said. Take me with you. Don't leave me here to drown. I looked down at her. This was the woman who 15 minutes ago had called me trash, laughed while Chet poured wine over my head, and watched as the crowd beat me. I pulled my leg back, letting her hands slip into the cold bilge water rising on the deck. You wanted the VIP experience, Whitney, I said smoothly. Enjoy the view. The stairwell leading down to the lower keel was a nightmare of iron and steam. The temperature had plunged to near freezing. The pressure differential was causing the steel walls to groan, a deep, agonizing sound like an iron beast being torn apart from the inside. Garrick followed 2 paces behind me, his tactical flashlight cutting through the thick fog rising from the bursting hot water pipes. Miss Sterling, Garrick panted, his gun drawn, his hands shaking violently. If Engineer Miller locked the manifold from the inside, we won't be able to open it without a plasma torch. He didn't lock it, I said, stepping over a severed hydraulic line that was whipping sparks into the dark. Miller is a narcissist. He wants to watch the gauges hit 900. He wants to be there when his masterpiece dies. We reached the heavy pressure door marked Ballast Manifold 04. The door was standing ajar. Inside, the room was vast, lit only by the dark amber glow of emergency floodlights. Water was pouring in from the bilge vents, already up to our knees. Standing on the catwalk above the main ballast valves was Engineer Miller. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and a heavy iron spanner in the other. He was staring at a glowing mechanical depth clock mounted on the bulkhead. 880 meters. Miller cackled, his voice echoing off the iron walls like a demon's. Look at her stretch. Feel the steel cry. The great Edward Sterling thought he could take my name off the patent. I'll bury his daughter's ship in the dark. Your math is wrong, Miller, I called out, my voice ringing clear through the chamber. Miller froze. He slowly turned around, shining his high-powered lantern down onto the catwalk where Garrick and I stood. When the light hit my face, Miller's crazy smile slowly faded. He squinted, taking in my features, the sharp jawline, the dark gray eyes, the exact eyes of Edward Sterling. You, Miller breathed, dropping his scotch glass into the rising water below, with a loud splash. You're the server. No, I know that face. You're Sterling's girl. My father didn't steal your work, Miller, I said, taking a slow step up the metal stairs toward him. He fired you 20 years ago because you cut corners on the pressure seals of the Titan I. 3 men died because you were lazy. Lies! Miller screamed, his face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. He raised the heavy spanner. He ruined me. He made me a ghost. And now I'm taking his precious little princess to the bottom with me. Miller lunged down the catwalk, swinging the spanner straight at my head with wild lunatic strength. Freeze! Garrick roared, raising his pistol. Bang! The gun discharged, but the damp powder and extreme humidity caused the round to strike the overhead steam pipe instead. A massive plume of boiling steam erupted between us, blinding Garrick and sending him stumbling backward off the catwalk into the knee-deep water. Miller burst through the white cloud of steam like a madman, his spanner coming down toward my temple. I didn't run. For 12 months, my father hadn't just forced me to clear plates and scrub bilge tanks. He had forced me to train with the Sterling Maritime Security detail until I could dismantle a diesel turbine in total darkness. I stepped inside his swing, slipping beneath the heavy iron tool. My left elbow struck Miller hard in the throat. He gasped, dropping the spanner. But his momentum carried him forward, slamming his heavy body into mine. We both crashed against the railing above the flooding intake pit. D. Miller hissed, his hands wrapping around my neck, his thumbs pressing into my windpipe. Die with the ship. My vision began to spot with black dots. The depth clock behind him clicked. Over 895 meters. A terrifying crack echoed through the chamber. The main observation glass 3 decks above us had just suffered its first major structural failure. I reached down with my right hand, fumbling blindly along the iron railing until my fingers wrapped around the emergency pressure relief lever of the primary ballast line. Miller. I choked out through my swelling throat. Do you know what happens when you open a high-pressure valve at 90 atmospheres? Miller's eyes widened in sudden, absolute terror. Wait, don't. I yanked the red lever down with every ounce of strength I had left. Boom. It was not an explosion of fire, but an explosion of pure, unadulterated physical force. The 90-atmosphere water pressure inside the primary intake line reversed. Instantly, a wall of compressed, freezing seawater exploded out of the valve, housing like a battering ram, striking Miller square in the chest. The force ripped his hands from my throat instantly. He let out a choked scream before being swept off the catwalk, carried by the roaring torrent straight into the iron intake grating below. The heavy steel grate slammed shut behind him under the force of the flow, sealing him into the very ballast tank he had tried to drown us in. His screams were cut off instantly as the tank flooded completely. I collapsed onto the metal catwalk, coughing violently, gasping for the cold, oil-slicked air. Miss Sterling. Garrick scrambled up the ladder, his uniform soaked, his face bleeding from a steam scrape. He pulled me up by my arms. Are you all right? The clock. I gasped, pointing up at the bulkhead. 908 meters. The red light on the hull integrity monitor was no longer flashing. It was solid, accompanied by a low, continuous tone that signified imminent structural collapse. We missed the manual override window. Garrick yelled over the roar of water. The electric valves are dead. How do we blow the tanks? We don't use the electric valves, I said, wiping blood from my lip as I stumbled toward the rear bulkhead. We use the Leviathan purge. Garrick went pale. The thermite charges. Miss Sterling, that's a suicidal design. If the hull seals don't hold the sudden thermal shock, the whole sub will split in half. It's either split in half or be flattened into a pancake in 30 seconds. I spat, ripping the protective yellow cover off the manual ignition housing on the wall. Behind the cover lay two massive, solid steel mechanical levers, requiring at least 300 pounds of joint force to pull simultaneously. Garrick, grab the left lever. I shouted. He didn't hesitate this time. He lunged forward, wrapping both hands around the rusted iron handle. I grabbed the right lever. On 3. I yelled, my eyes locked on the depth gauge, which was now creeping past 915 meters. 1, 2, 3. We threw our entire body weights downward. For 2 terrifying seconds, nothing happened. The levers groaned, frozen by decades of disuse and immense external pressure. Then, with a deafening clang, the mechanical pins sheared off. Deep within the keel of the sub, beneath thousands of tons of freezing water, 4 solid-state thermite gas generators ignited simultaneously. The extreme heat instantly converted hundreds of gallons of water into superheated steam, creating a massive, unstoppable pressure wave that forced every drop of water out of the emergency ballast tanks in a fraction of a second. Hoot 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 hoot. The abyssal Voyager didn't just stop its descent. The violent release of mass caused the 10,000-ton submarine to shudder violently, groaning as if its spine had been struck by a hammer, before its bow pitched upward at a 30-degree angle. We began to shoot toward the surface like a torpedo. The force threw Garrick and me off the catwalk, crashing into the rising water. On the deck below, as the depth gauge began to count backward at light speed, 850, 700. 500, 300. Splash. The abyssal Voyager broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean like a leaping whale. Its massive steel bow crashing down onto the midnight waves, sending a two-story wall of foam into the night air. Inside the main observation hall, the surviving passengers, who had been curled in corners expecting to be crushed into paste, were thrown across the deck as the vessel stabilized, floating heavily on the rolling swell. The blood-red emergency lights died. The bright, white backup daylight lanterns snapped on, illuminating the wreckage of the hall. Spilled wine, floating furniture, broken glass, and crying billionaires covered the floor. Whitney sat near the center bar, her hands bleeding, her face pale as a sheet, staring blankly at the ceiling. We're alive? The fat billionaire scrambled to his feet, rushing to the shattered observation window. Outside, through the rain and spray, the vast, dark expanse of the open ocean stretched out under the stars. "We made it," he screamed, weeping like a child. "We're on the surface. Open the hatches." Before anyone could touch the exit ladders, the sound of heavy, thunderous helicopter blades roared overhead. Blinding, high-intensity searchlights cut through the rain, illuminating the observation deck through the cracked glass like a stage. Over the sub's long-range marine radio, an authoritative, booming voice echoed through the external speakers. "Attention abyssal Voyager. This is the Sterling Global Maritime Flagship. Sovereign. Stand down immediately. Boarding teams are deploying." Outside, 3 massive 300-foot naval escort vessels painted in dark sterling gray pulled up alongside the floating submarine, their heavy steel hulls blocking the rolling waves. Dozens of armed tactical guards in black sterling uniforms rappelled down from seeking helicopters, landing on the sub's outer hull. Within 60 seconds, the heavy top-pressure hatch of the observation hall was cut open from the outside with a hydraulic spreader. Fresh, cold ocean night air rushed into the stale, oil-smelling room. A dozen armed sterling tactical officers flooded down the ladders, forming 2 lines along the gangway, their rifles held at low ready. Behind them stepped down a man in a bespoke, immaculate dark suit. His hair was silver at the temples, his face stern and imposing. It was Director Kincaid, the vice chairman of Sterling Global Group, and my father's most trusted right hand. The fat billionaire, seeing the military-grade rescue team, immediately pushed his way to the front, pointing his finger toward the lower hatches. "Officer, thank God you're here," the fat man yelled, putting on his arrogant persona again. "I am Harrison Vance of Vance Logistics. I demand to be taken to your flagship immediately. Also, your crew here is completely incompetent. A crazy waitress broke the systems and almost got us killed." Director Kincaid didn't even look at the billionaire. He swept his sharp eyes across the ruined, flooded hall, stepping over broken champagne bottles, until his gaze landed on the heavy iron hatch leading up from the lower keel. The hatch swung open. I walked out. I was barefoot. My uniform was torn at the shoulder, soaked in bilge water, grease and dried blood. My hands were raw and bruised from the thermite levers. Dr. Serena and a battered Garrick followed behind me. When I stepped into the bright floodlights of the hall, Director Kincaid immediately took off his heavy wool trench coat. In front of the 24 surviving billionaires, the crew and the trembling Whitney, Director Kincaid walked straight toward me, bowed 90 degrees at his waist, and gently placed the heavy coat over my shivering shoulders. His voice echoed loud and clear through the silent room. "We received your distress telemetry 30 minutes ago, Miss Sterling. Chairman Edward Sterling is on satellite line 1. He extends his personal congratulations. You have officially completed your final evaluation, Chairman Nora." The hall went so quiet that you could hear the rain tapping against the steel hull outside. Harrison Vance's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The fat billionaire took a staggering step back, his eyes bulging as if he had just seen a ghost. Miss Sterling?" he stammered, his face turning from red to a terrifying, translucent white. She's Edward Sterling's daughter." Whitney sat frozen on the wet floor, her manicured fingers clutching a piece of torn-up upholstery. Her brain short-circuited. The woman she had called a trashy, fish-smelling servant. The woman Chet had dumped to chase Whitney's wealth. The woman they had beaten, wine-soaked, and thrown to the guards, was the sole owner of the vessel, the fleet, and the entire conglomerate that supplied her family's business. "No," Whitney whispered, her voice cracking into a high-pitched whimper. No, that's impossible. She's just a waitress." I didn't look at her. I pulled Kincaid's wool coat around myself, feeling the warmth seep back into my cold bones, and took the satellite phone he handed me. "Dad," I said into the receiver, my voice steady, ice-cold and unbothered. "Nora." My father's deep, gravelly voice came through the speaker. "You purged the manifold. You used the Leviathan protocol. Most men twice your age would have panicked and died in that trench. Your sub was poorly maintained at the lower seals," I replied flatly. "I'm firing the entire quality assurance division tomorrow morning. My father let out a rare, booming laugh over the line. Granted. You've passed. My girl. The empire is yours. How do you wish to handle the survivors? I lowered the phone and looked across the ruined hall. Harrison Vance was sweating profusely, bowing repeatedly toward me. Miss Sterling. Please. I was mistaken. I didn't know. My company has 3 shipping contracts with Sterling Global. Cancel them, I said to Kincaid, my voice ringing out clearly. Liquidate Vance Logistics credit lines by midnight. If Mr. Vance likes the deep sea so much, he can try shipping his cargo on foot. Harrison let out a choked gasp, clutching his chest as he collapsed back into the arms of his assistants, ruined in a single sentence. I turned my eyes to Garrick. The security chief immediately fell to one knee on the wet deck, his head bowed. I await your punishment, Chairman. You were ignorant, but you pulled the lever when it mattered, I said calmly. Demoted to third-class deckhand on the North Sea freighter routes for 2 years. If you survive, you can reapply for your post. Garrick let out a massive sigh of relief. Thank you, Miss Sterling. Thank you. Finally, my gaze landed on Whitney. She was trembling so violently she couldn't even stand up. When my eyes met hers, she scrambled forward on her hands and knees, weeping hysterically, her head touching the filthy, wine-stained floorboards at my feet. Nora. Miss Sterling. I'm sorry. I was blind. Chet tricked me. He made me do it, she sobbed, her voice raw and pathetic. Please don't ruin my family. I'll do anything. I'll be your servant. I'll clean your shoes. I looked down at her with complete, unadulterated detachment. Chet didn't trick you, Whitney, I said, my voice smooth as silk. You chose him because you thought he was a ticket to the top. And he chose you because he thought you were rich. I leaned down slightly, looking into her tear-filled, terrified eyes. You two were made for each other. It's a shame he died early. I looked up at Director Kincaid. Have Miss White blacklisted from every Sterling port, resort, and subsidiary worldwide. And inform her family that their maritime insurance policies are officially revoked. Understood, Chairman. Kincaid bowed. 2 armed Sterling guards stepped forward, grabbing Whitney by her arms and dragging her backward across the wet deck as she screamed and wept, her cries fading into the ocean rain outside. Dr. Serena stepped forward, offering me a clean towel. Where to now, Chairman? Dr. Serena asked with a quiet, respectful smile. I wiped the last trace of ocean salt from my forehead, turned my back on the wreckage of the observation hall, and walked up the gangway toward the blinding lights of the flagship waiting above. To the surface, I said, looking out at the endless horizon under the morning sun. I have an empire to run.